I am the for this year for the Hollow Lake Community Club. I hope you were able to come out to our fantastic family carnival we had, which was a great time for all of us as well. So we'll have to see about doing that next year. Our next big event will be trunk or treat at Halloween. If you'd like to bring your car, email us on our website. We'll we would love to have you. Or just come and participate. That's always fun too. I'd like to thank all of the candidates for coming tonight and being willing to share and speak with us and answer our questions.
And candidates, also bring the microphone very close to your mouth, please. It's not working.
And I will pass it off. Is Angela going to say for this?
No, Jim's.
Jim is going to say for I'm going to pass it back to Jim.
So on behalf of the Broadview Bitter Lake Community Council, I want to thank you all for attending. Anybody here from Broadview Bitter Lake? Yeah, all right, we got someone. Thank you very much for coming, and hopefully there's some folks online listening as well. Frankly, we are still recovering from the pandemic, as it were. We have a small cohort of people who have been keeping the community council afloat and would welcome participation by anyone who cares about city issues or other local issues, neighborhood issues, to please get involved and help us reinvigorate our community organization on behalf of neighbors and businesses in the community. You know, there's lots of things that can be done, and would welcome more participation. So let's get started. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and we're going to start at the very end with our federal office, and then statewide, and then all the different senators and representatives with the 32nd district and the 46th district. So Cliff, would you like to start?
My name is Cliff Moon, and I'm running for Congress for District 7, and which takes Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, all the way down to Normandy Park, as well as Vashon Island, kind of a big area. I'm a small business owner, a general contractor to be exact, and my company's been in business for 50 years. In fact, in 2001, we built the elevator assembly that you have to get into this second floor of your club. So I'm also a grandfather, a great grandfather. Been married for 56 years, so there's some loyalty there, and that's what I want to bring to represent the constituents in my district. Thank you.
Next up, we have Julie Anderson, who's running for Secretary of State.
This feels a little bit like a fair. I was just at the Kitsap, the Kittitas County Fair. I feel like I'm in a 4-H ring. My name is Julie Anderson, and I am running for Secretary of State as a nonpartisan candidate. I have 13 years of professional experience running elections in Washington State as the Pierce County Auditor. You all know that the county auditors are the ones that actually run elections, and then the Secretary of State certifies. So it's important that for 13 years, I've presided over hundreds of elections, have been recording and protecting documents and making them accessible to you in our document reporting department, and then also business licensing through business registry. I'm endorsed by over 40 election professionals in Washington State. They're Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents. They've endorsed me because they've worked with me. They trust my leadership. They know my skills, and they know how important it is to have someone with experience in the office. I'm running as a nonpartisan because not that I don't like political parties, but they don't belong in this office or add value to elections oversight, because the system needs to work for everybody. I'm putting that to the test. I am running on my own without any party money or any party endorsements, and it's all individual funding and pulling myself up doing bootstraps. I was raised in a military family, so we've lived all over the world in the United States, and currently obviously residing in Tacoma, Pierce County. I've got a detailed website that I do hope you'll visit after the event. I've got detailed plans for all of the divisions within the Secretary of State. And you can learn a lot about me there. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Let's do next the 32nd District Senate race. And we can start with the challenger, Dr. Patricia Webb.
First off, I want to say thank you for inviting me as a friendly neighbor to your event. I also want to take a moment to honor Queen Elizabeth II. She was the finest example of a woman committed to duty and service, and we would all do well to follow her soon. Thank you. So I am a physician. I have lived in Shoreline, the 32nd District, for over 30 years. I have worked at Fernfest, which is a state residential facility also in Shoreline. So I'm well aware of the effects of state governance and state issues. I raised my son in Shoreline as a single parent, so I'm well aware of the educational efforts also. I have three things that are primary, although we have tons and tons of issues in this state. Number one, because of my background, is healthcare, primarily mental health care. Second is affordable housing, which we all know what a crisis this is right now. And third is the environment, because that is the overarching element for all of our lives. I can say that I also have a website, votepacweather.com. You're all welcome to join there. We have weekly events and the issues are presented on that website as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now your current state senator in the 32nd, Jesse Solomon.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. I guess I'll take a little less formal approach, although I think my suit belies that. I want to say the last 4 years serving in the legislature with my colleagues here, with the Democratic majority has been deeply, deeply meaningful, and we've accomplished a lot. Not to say there aren't frustrations, there are. We're dealing with big societal problems, homelessness, criminal justice, housing. But I'm proud to say I've written and passed a lot of bills to move forward on those issues. For example, I passed a bill last year, 5818, to make it easier to build housing, especially smaller units. I think the big McMansions are not really helping housing affordability. So we need to build more units like 1,500 square feet or smaller. And so that's going to be moving forward easier. There's no one bill that's going to solve this housing problem, this crisis. But we need to work on it. On the criminal justice side, I've been a public defender for 15 years. I know that many people get trapped in a cycle of poverty where they lose their driver's license because they can't pay their tickets, and then they get charged with a crime for driving, and then they lose their job, and it sort of never ends. So I was able to use that experience to change the way we do that. So you're never going to be suspended for your inability to pay, but rather if you have too many driving infractions. So it has no longer based on your financial situation, but on your bad driving or good driving. I think that's a lot more fair. That's going to help 80,000 people in this state over the next decade, and I'm very proud of that. We need to move forward on homelessness issues. We are dealing with a very serious drug problem, and I think we need to have different tools. We're not going back. I think it's likely we're not going back towards criminalization, at least as a first response. So I have introduced a bill last year that would require treatments. If you have a substance use disorder and are caught using drugs in public, you have to get an evaluation and follow through. Otherwise, you can be held in contempt of courts. So there is sanctions, but not criminal effects. And so we're trying to walk the right path here, but have some accountability. Should I give more time? No. It's at 0 and then it's 15. All right.
Thank you. So next we'll go to the #1 position for the 32nd district, Our current representative there, Cindy Rue, could not attend tonight, but she did call in online, and we're going to do our best to hear her in the room, and everybody online can hear her.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so very much for being inclusive. And as
Hold on just a second.
as I was being asked to attend,
We're trying to find where this is on here.
The sound is coming out.
Yeah.
We should turn it on.
can you hear me?
It's up all
Should
the
I
way.
keep doing the testing? One,
Try
two,
this now.
three. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Cindy Ryu. I'm state representative in position 1 in the 32nd legislative district, which includes a little bit of Seattle, as well your neighborhoods, as well as, of course, all of Shoreline, and then we move into Snohomish County. I served as mayor and city council member before I started serving in the legislature, and I am serving my 6th term and running for my 7th term. I chaired the Community and Economic Development Committee. And so right now I'm in Port Townsend because we are having an outdoor caucus meeting, a 2-day meeting regarding trails, state parks, all the outdoor funding issues that we'll be discussing tomorrow, because we know how important recreation, but also access to outdoor facilities are, especially public facilities. I am also concentrating on broadband, not only underserved, but also unserved. And so we have been working along with my seatmates, Senator Jesse Solomon, as well as Representative Lauren Davis, along with all of our other members, to make sure that we are funding broadband and other infrastructure needs, outstanding needs, in a robust manner. Because in order to make sure that our communities are healthy, we have to make investments and continue to make investments, especially for operations and management. One particular one of interest to you is Aurora Avenue. And as you can tell, Shoreline went through a very painful and lengthy process to build all 3 miles of it. But we did it, we got it done. And actually 20 years ago, that was exactly why I became a politician. And so I am more than willing to engage with your neighbors and you. And I am encouraging the volunteers that are not giving up on making sure there's not only just the first $50 million, but ongoing. Is that a sign that I'm done with my time?
Yeah, that's 2
May I
minutes.
just, oh,
That's 2
sorry.
minutes.
May I
Thank you.
convey regrets from Secretary of State Hobbs? He is serving in the Guard as Lieutenant Colonel, and he was busy with Guard duty. So he sends
you very
both
much,
his regards
Representative.
as well as regrets.
We're doing our best with technology. So next up in the 32nd district, position 2 is Lauren Davis.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to the organizers. It has been an incredible privilege to represent many of you and the House for the last 4 years. I spent a lot of my time in the legislature focused on mental health and addiction services and suicide prevention, which incidentally is my professional background, and a lot of work in my last term on domestic violence services specifically. I think instead of a traditional opening statement, I'd actually rather just tell you a quick story that I think underscores the way I operate in this office. Last summer, in the city of Linwood, so the most northern portion of our district, the city was set to build a large correctional facility, almost 3 times the size of the current jail. And that's pretty inconsistent with the conversation we were having nationally at the time. And that was amplified when we tragically lost a woman to suicide, entirely preventable death in the correctional facility. And understandably so, a lot of community members were incredibly upset and not wanting this large correctional facility, particularly in the face of this tragedy. And so I worked with a number of colleagues to bring together stakeholders and actually completely redesign that facility such that we reduce the capacity of the jail permanently by 30%. There's 36 correctional beds that will never be built. And we, in its place, are building a 31-bed mental health and addiction crisis facility in the district. And I'm really proud of that. And the other thing I'll mention in 26 seconds is we engaged individuals with lived experience in that process. So people who had been incarcerated, people who are in recovery from mental health and addiction services, and really helped shape what that facility will look like. It will open its doors in October of 2023. And we were able to fully fund that project, $17 million in 6 months, which is unheard of and is really critical as we roll out the 988 behavioral health emergency line, which went live in July. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The next up is the 46th District Senate race. These are both new candidates for this office. Running from his seat as a representative, Javier Valdez is represented tonight by campaign manager Henry, who can address and start us off.
Hello, everyone. I am not Javier Valdez. Unfortunately, Javier is part of a national committee that has meetings this week, and he was unable to get back into Washington in time for this. He's very sorry to have missed this event and is looking forward to talking to you all one-on-one when he gets back next week. I should really know his itinerary better. Javier has done a lot in his time in the House. His top priorities are stopping gun violence, ending hate crimes, and continuing to work on making our transportation system greener. Transportation is the largest single source of carbon emissions in Washington State. Javier was part of the team last year that passed one of the largest transportation packages in Washington State history, including a whole lot of funding in our area towards expanding pedestrian and bike access to existing public transit. It's going to go a long way to making sure that the transit we already have is accessible and making sure that we are moving in the right direction as quickly as possible. Stopping gun violence, he was working on legislation last year that reduced the max magazine capacity size in Washington. He's working towards a bill that would ban assault weapons next year. We cannot allow, especially school shootings, to continue to happen in Washington. And this is a really important step in that process. I'm very sorry to say that I've forgotten what my third point was I was supposed to talk about, but I'm happy to answer questions on Javier's behalf. And hate crimes. Thank you. Javier also sponsored legislation that called hate crimes what they are. Unfortunately, in Washington state law, it had been called malicious harassment. And as we've seen in the last few years with the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes and anti-Semitic hate crimes, we have to start by calling them what they are so we can work on addressing the underlying problems. And there's a long way to go there, but calling hate crimes is step one. Javier is committed to continue to work on that. Thank you, Lisa.
And also running in the 46th Senate race, Mathew or Matt Gross is here tonight. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much. And good evening, everybody. I was talking with Randy in the parking lot, and he told me this building was built in 1922. So it's the 100-year anniversary. It's so wonderful to see. Yeah. Elevator still standing, but it's great to have a place where you can come together and gather in the neighborhood, especially after the past couple of years. That has been difficult. Me and my wife moved into our neighborhood in March 2020, and it's been hard to meet neighbors and all that. So I really appreciate being here. I appreciate you inviting us and giving us the time and the space to be here. My son is 1 year old. He just started daycare this week. This is his first week. It's been a very hard week for me and my family. The transition has been tough for him. My wife is home with him right now, putting him to bed by herself. And so I want to thank my wife for being willing to do that so I can be here with you. My wife is also a public school teacher in the city of Seattle and has been picketing for the past 2 days because their union is on strike. And one thing I can tell you all is she would absolutely rather be in the classroom than be walking up and down the street for 20 minutes a day with a red t-shirt on in the sun. But public education is one of the really important things that the state government needs to do a better job of funding so that we don't have this sort of crisis every time a new contract is up. One of the big things that the teachers are fighting for right now is higher pay for para-educators or people who work in special ed or with English language learners, because people in those professions are having a really tough time making ends meet, especially in the city of Seattle with the rising cost of living. So I wanted to just use this time to send my support to the teachers union while they're on strike.
Thank you, Matt. Next in the 46th, position 1, Gerry Pollet.
Thank you for having us. This is the only candidates forum that I'm aware of for at least the 46th district out of the 32nd district and the others. And you've been the beacon of involvement at the Howler Lake Community Club and Bitter Lake for the communities. Thank you for your service and doing this. I'm Representative Gerry Pollet. I've been serving as your state representative in 46th since 2012. In terms of background, I also am a faculty member at the UW School of Public Health. And so I've had some work to do in terms of state policy for the last couple of years. And we're not done with public health response. And a lot more to be done, including making sure our children and kiddos are safe when they go to school, and that we have programs in place for vaccinations. Our contact tracing has fallen apart already, and we have a lot to do in this state to be ready for Omicron and what may come next. When I was appointed originally and then ran for this office, I made 2 commitments to you as my constituents. 1, I would always stand up for the public interest. Number 2, I would be the most accessible legislator in the state of Washington. And I hope I've represented you meeting those 2 standards. In terms of local issues, when Howler Lake community was faced with city and state officials saying, let's run huge electric lines through the middle of the community, I was the one who got city and the state together and said, that's unacceptable. Why aren't we running them on the west side of I-5? When Lake City does not have a community center that's can serve the seniors and the youth of Lake City, I'm there working to fund it. I've also sponsored and led on many national issues, from climate to education and funding education. I'm done. That's it.
Thank you very much. In representative position 2, we've got 2 candidates here tonight. Let's start with Lelach Rave.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I am Lelach Rave. I am a child of immigrants. I learned English as a second language when I got to school. And as I grew up, I suppose I sort of fulfilled some of what you think of as the immigrant dream. I ended up becoming a doctor and specialized in pediatrics. And so as I am looking at this run, I'm hoping to be the first pediatrician, unless I have company, but the first pediatrician that we've ever had in our state legislature. And we haven't had a position in the legislature for 10 years. So I'm hoping to bring some content matter expertise. And there seem to be a lot of things going on right now where health really is first and foremost. There's the pandemic, as Gerry was mentioning. There is the absolute scourge of gun violence, which in my mind is a public health issue. There's reproductive health, which is on the chopping block nationally. And though we have some fabulous laws here, we know that our demand for reproductive health is going to go through the roof as we become a sanctuary state where people from all over come here and want these health services. And we have our mental health crisis, which I know in my office, easily half the day, every day now, which means it's also taking over our schools, it's taking over our workplaces, and we're seeing it play out on our streets with portions of our unhoused population. So there are lots of places, sadly, where health really is playing out first and foremost, and we don't have any voices in Olympia who really can speak to that in the way that a clinician can. In terms of priorities, mental health has been from the top, from the start, a priority for me. Education as well. And when Matt speaks about the teachers and the strike, as an English language learner myself in school, and as a mom of 2 kids who have individualized learning plans, those issues are very personal and real to me. And finally, the environment. If we don't have a planet to live on, none of the rest of this makes any sense. And I'm hoping that the science voice will be helpful for that in Olympia as well.
Thank you. And then next is Darya Farivar.
Hi, everyone. Darya Farivar here. First of all, I'm so sorry I was late. It's been a bit of a hectic day. Why am I running? I'm running for a couple reasons. First and foremost, I am running because 46th district is my home. I've lived here my whole life. I went to grade school here. My parents, when they fled Iran because of the revolution, they actually met at my high school, which was Roosevelt High School. And my family put down roots in the Lake City neighborhood. I love Lake City dearly, but it's a neighborhood that's been struggling pretty significantly over the years. Neighborhood much like neighborhoods along the Aurora corridor. In Lake City, I'm really not able to go anywhere without seeing folks who are experiencing homelessness, housing instability, mental illness, and substance use, and seeing folks get pulled into the criminal legal system when they don't get the help that they need. Those are my top priorities for this race, not just because I see it every day, but it's the work I'm doing right now. I'm the public policy director for a nonprofit called Disability Rights Washington, where I work on the issues impacting Lake City every single day in the legislature. I know that system very, very well, and I know that it takes years to learn it to be able to navigate it successfully. In addition to my work in the legislature, I'm also proud to be a part of a team that oversees 12 different behavioral health diversion programs across the state. The Zoom type. There are programs that are doing well. They are focused on providing help as soon as help is needed, instead of waiting for folks to fall through every last crack in the system before even attempting to reach out. I want to see a system like that. I want to see our state focus on providing help as soon as help is needed. And I want to make sure we're doing that focused in on the folks who are going to be directly impacted. It is no accident that my slogan is lifting every voice. It's because my entire career has been about that, starting as an organizer, working with immigrants and refugees with developmental disabilities, to now working at DRW. If we want to tackle these big problems, we're going to need to focus in on the folks who are directly impacted by it. If I'm elected, I would be proud to serve as the first Middle Eastern woman elected to the state legislature and the youngest to ever represent our district. It's time for some fresh new faces. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the other end of the table, a federal issue. A couple of you mentioned it as a state question. I think there's a mic we can share down there. Cliff, this question was specifically for you about reproductive rights. Is it ever okay for a man to tell a woman what she can or can't do with her body?
No, I think that it shouldn't be the man. I have, this is my first year or first time in politics, and I've received to date 265 emails. And of those referring to reproductive rights, every one of them has been from a man and not from a woman. I'm a little surprised at that.
Thank you. Julie, the Secretary of State does a lot of things. One of the primary responsibilities is elections. Is there anything you would do to change the election system in Washington State?
No, one of the things that I'll be doing is preserving the backbone of the election laws that we have in Washington State that have served voters really well in a legally and secure manner. So vote by mail is something that we need to preserve. Making it better is always the goal of an election administrator in communities. Ways of making it better is we've got, even though it seems like nationally, it seems like locally we struggle with turnout, you know, in the off-year elections. When you look at us nationwide, we have tremendous turnout in Washington state. It just doesn't feel very good when you're looking at a 30% turnout when there was a important school on the ballot, right? But to increase voter turnout and get those residual gains, it's going to take a lot of hard work because the people that are sitting on the sidelines are really hard to reach, just like they were hard to reach populations in the census too. So it's going to take a lot of innovation. It's going to take partnerships with community to reach those folks. And it's going to take a lot of stickiness with local government and elected leaders so that people can see themselves in who's representing them to really get them to turn out. I would like to make some enhancements to security and transparency. I'm proposing a statewide risk limiting audit, which currently isn't being done. We've got good security controls county by county for sure. And I can talk more about that some other time, but both my mail is here.
Thank you very much. So a question that came in through the audience, and I'll tailor it a little bit for all of you running for state rep or state senate. The Move Ahead Washington bill provided $50 million to do a big project on Aurora. It's a main thoroughfare through both of our districts. It's a state highway, but it's also a city street, so to speak. The city is going to is putting money up to study the whole corridor and what could be done with it. The $50 million went to a different neighborhood where we're the neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks, has drainage issues. And thinking about this whole thing, especially the 46th, I guess, what would be your plans to make Aurora more of a neighborhood resource, make it less industrial, and really get support for our corridor here? So how about we start here? Bring the mic up. And then we'll just send it all the way down. And you've got 90 seconds. Are you counting?
Yeah.
Okay, Darya here again. So when I look at the Aurora corridor, and when I talk to folks, I spent a good amount of time doorbelling in the corridor, trying to hear from folks who are living close to Aurora. What is it that you want from your representatives and your senators? What do you need? And, you know, to make Aurora a area that's, you know, less industrial, more community-based, you know, one of the things that folks really are talking about is safety, and is making sure that folks feel comfortable coming to Aurora, period. I really think that in order for us to make sure that folks feel safe, we have to make sure that folks have the resources they need to survive and thrive ultimately. And there's a lot of folks who are really struggling in the neighborhood. That's why my priorities always come back down to behavioral health, housing and homelessness, and the criminal legal system. We have to make sure that we're getting to folks earlier, right? Right now, our behavioral health system, we're doing some good work there, but we need to do more to build up the front part of the system so that folks don't get to a point where we're forced to use things like the Involuntary Treatment Act. It's an important resource that has to be there, but if we wait for folks to reach that criteria before getting any help, we're really asking folks to become a danger to themselves or others or gravely disabled. That's not working for our community. And to make Aurora a community and less industrial and make sure that folks feel comfortable accessing it, we have to tackle the front part of the system.
Thank you.
Same question?
Yep.
All right,
All the way down.
you got it. So I have recently been acquainted with the Aurora Reimagined Coalition and think that that is a fabulous, fabulous community-based, community voices-centered effort to really take a look at what's happening in this area and from the community come up with solutions. I agree that mental health is a huge part of this, as is drug addiction. And some of the clinical voice that I bring to that, I see both of those as medical diagnoses. And there's some interesting stuff happening. Up at Providence Everett Medical Center in their ER, they are trialing a drug that binds to opioid receptors and stays present in people's blood for 2 to 3 weeks. So they can take an individual who comes into the ER who is intoxicated with an opioid, give them this. While they're in the ER, they see that high come down and it stays out of their system for that period of time. Is that long enough to cure an addiction? Absolutely not. Is it long enough to get someone connected in with perhaps housing, perhaps their ID that they have lost, they can then go to an office and get themselves established? Absolutely. So I think bringing in the medical world to what we're seeing with our public health crises and our mental health crises is very, very important. And that's the type of innovation that I'd like to see us really invest in and sponsor.
I think it's interesting that we're talking about $50 million for improving safety and improving conditions for businesses and building community on Aurora. And the first thing we talk about are behavioral health issues. We're going to talk a lot tonight about behavioral health. I'm going to talk about Aurora. No sidewalks. No ability to walk and go from store to store in huge stretches. I've been there with the coalition, watching students leaving Ingram High School and, seeing how can't use the crosswalks, the bridge over at 125th, because the bridge lands where there's no sidewalks. What kind of planning was that? So we've got a lot of work to do. And the question is 50 million enough? No, it's a start. Is it okay to only plan 90 to 105? No, because guess what? Problems start below 90th and they continue far above 90 at 105th. We've got a plan for the entire corridor. I understand that we're worried about whether or not the funds are adequate for investments beyond the 15 stretch, but we can get more money and we will.
Matt?
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Matt Gross. Again, I'm running state senate in the 4 to 6. I don't have too much to add. It sounds from the way the question was posed, it sounds like this is a transportation issue that the question is asking about. One of my plans is for the state government to spend $2.5 billion per year on housing for the next 10 years. Because my goal ultimately and my vision is for our state to end homelessness statewide. And I think that's the type of money that it will take to do that. We're not even close to that type of number at this point. So the money that I think we need to be spending at the state level should be going towards housing. And I think that's the priority for my campaign. And I was asked about the Aurora corridor during the stranger interview. And I know that that is an important issue for this area. But I also heard from people in Licton Springs and Pollet Lake about their safety concerns related to Aurora, more so based on being victims of crime rather than hearing about the transportation issues. So I agree with Darya and Dr. Rave about the behavioral health issues and how important it is to invest in people's stability and to try and keep the neighborhood safe. So that's would be sort of my vision for Aurora. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Henry, can Mr. Valdez get us that money to improve our stretch of Aurora?
While I am not an expert on the Move Ahead Washington program and the Aurora Avenue Safety Project, Javier absolutely is. He has been on the Transportation Committee in the State House for several years. He was actually vice chair and was part of the team that wrote that package. This is exactly the kind of problem that a lot of the funding in Move Ahead is trying to solve by expanding pedestrian and bike access on stretches of Aurora where people want to be walking, where people need to be able to walk, and making sure that there's accessible pathways there and connecting people to existing public transit is a huge failure so far of the state, and this is definitely a step towards that. There is, of course, a public health crisis happening on Aurora that needs to be addressed at the same time. But there is definitely a lot of planning going into the infrastructure expansions that need to be happening. Javier could talk to you for hours, literally, about exactly what those are and how we're going to be funding them. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm very sorry.
Thank you. Lauren?
Thank you for the question. So for anyone who's not familiar, Move Ahead Washington was our large transportation package, which is pretty neat as somebody who's only been in for 4 years to get to participate in one. They don't happen. My understanding is about a once a decade roughly. And so the funding allocated for Aurora in the package is for the types of interventions described, turn lanes and sidewalks and pedestrian bridges and safety interventions. So Aurora is really interesting in the 32nd district. It runs through the entirety of the district, and you're all familiar being neighbors. There's a stark difference between the Seattle portions of the district, the shoreline portion of Aurora, and then the second that you leave the city of Shoreline into South Edmonds. I used to live right near here on 130th and Aurora, and I'm deeply familiar with some of the challenges. As I mentioned, I work in behavioral health, and we look at heat maps for overdoses. North Aurora consistently, both fatal and non-fatal overdoses. Individuals being commercially sexually exploited. I think people see that regularly. And so I think it's really important is that we don't divorce those two issues, that we look at as far as the actual infrastructure planning, look no further than our friendly neighbors to the north, the city of Shoreline, who 20 years ago did an incredible job redeveloping, but that we pair that in tandem with the very necessary human services. King County is doing a great job, including a hotel in Aurora, their health through housing program, providing that kind of housing first model and going from there. Thank you.
So before we go, we're going to go back to Representative Ryu and see if we can get you. Go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right, thank you so much. Definitely, we need to make sure that we continue to invest in Aurora Avenue. I've got an echo, but I hope you can hear me. Oh, good, thank you. All right, yes, we have to continue to fund Aurora Avenue. And that 50 million is absolutely not adequate. And it's like a starter east that the SDOT, Seattle Department of Transportation, who will be the lead agency, will have to be committed to this project. And so I think it's incumbent on you as Seattle residents to make sure that not only the mayor, but the new SDOT director, as well as each and every one of your city council members are absolutely committed to working on this. It will be quite a few years effort, and it will take millions and millions of dollars, but I am very sure the congressional members will be very open to, especially once SDOT gets going on the planning and so on, to make sure that it is funded. And you will probably have, just like Shoreline, more than 10 different sources of funding. That's how highways are revitalized. And so it's going to be a huge, heavy lift and absolutely necessary to not only for transportation and not only the up and down, north and south, but also the east and west connections as well, and multimodal as well. It looks like Aurora Avenue looks like it's for motorists only, but it's not. It's also multimodal. And the connections to the routes to school and as well as services, they are all connected. So think of it as infrastructure investments that that can be the, I guess, the initial and coordinated with other services that we must invest in.
housing agency to develop very low income housing with wraparound services. And that passed the city council, and so that's actually being constructed. That's gonna help, I think, 99 individuals, families, 99 units. If you look at Shoreline, the combination of services, and the quality of life and the infrastructure, that we've developed, you feel much safer there. It's a much more pleasant place to be. And I don't know, what came first, was it, the development of sidewalk or the housing, whatnot. But I would suggest that the city of Seattle work with the city of Shoreline staff to understand what we did right. Instead of saying it's not enough, we didn't do a good job, we did a good job. We got a template. Let's make that happen in Seattle.
Dr. Weber.
Thank you. I agree that Aurora Avenue in Shoreline is attractive. The traffic flow has been helped immensely by the development. But I also want, when you all participate with your city council and your legislators, caution you that we put many small businesses out of business in that construction. And they didn't return, they didn't have any place to go. So if there are certain businesses that you favor, please advocate for them. The other thing is, in Shoreline's rush for development, there are many large development living buildings that have no frontage. They front right on Aurora Avenue. So that's another cautionary tale. Now, I grant you the sidewalks, the traffic flow are all better. In regards to people have mentioned behavioral health, just off Aurora Avenue and Shoreline is the interurban trail. And that has been hit with a lot of unhoused people that are there, making the interurban trail not as safe. And some of that vandalism has spread onto Aurora Avenue itself. So there are good and bad. And as was mentioned, you have a lot to learn from Shoreline. It's a nice, easy drive, but living not necessarily perfect. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Julie. There's a specific question for you that came from the audience online. Would you clarify whether you wrote an editorial in the Tacoma News Tribune that increasing turnout was not your responsibility?
What I remember about that editorial and what I've constantly said is that election administration, our number one duty is to make sure that we're eliminating barriers to access and that we're facilitating access as an election administrator. What I can't do is I can't bring people to be passionate about local government or to be engaged with their government. I can't be the candidate that's knocking on every household door, engaging voters. My number one responsibility is eliminating barriers and increasing access through election administration with tools. I want to increase voter access. I want to partner, as I said in my opening statement, with communities to increase voter turnout. But a lot of that, this isn't a Washington State problem. It's not a Pierce County problem. It's an America problem. Voters are very predictable about when they participate and when they don't. And I'm proud to have relieved every barrier that just about that I know about. And I'm looking forward to additional challenges like reaching out to voters who are living with disabilities, who may need specialized technology and programs to feel, one, invited to participate, and then two, to be able to do so independently and privately. You may think that vote by mail is a really accessible form of voting. It is. If you have your site, if you don't need adaptive technology, and if you're able to hold a pencil and hold paper. But otherwise, you're going to have to ask for assistance with the caretaker, and that's not fair.
Thank you. Hand the mic to Cliff, and then this question, we can go from federal to state. A general question about taxes. What would you do differently about taxes? And for the state candidates, it's often the question in these kinds of forums is, can we get a state income tax to relieve all the burden of property taxes and sales taxes. But if you have other ideas about taxes, feel free to bring them up.
Wow. I don't like taxes. I don't know, either, no matter what you do, if you do an income tax, it's gonna be unfair to people. If you do continued property tax, it's unfair to people. It's a fine line that you need to walk. I think that you need to have some fiscal responsibility at both nationally as well as in the state to make sure that, all the nickels and dimes you spend are accountable and they're wisely spent. So, and in order to do the things you want to do, you want to build sidewalks, cost money, and how are you going to get that? Taxes is one of the keys, and either sales tax or property tax or income tax. But if you do that, you're gonna have to distribute it, in an appropriate manner so that everybody feels like they're contributing their fair share and they're not overburdened. So, yeah.
Let's go to Dr. Weber next.
Thank you. I think as far as taxes, we're also talking about revenue. The state needs revenue. We all want services. We need revenue to do that. One of the things that's seldom addressed is a lot of the tax exemptions that the state gives to big businesses, to corporations. We need to look at those. Those are not always visible. They're not always well documented. We need to look at that and see if there's a way we can better use those tax exemptions or lessen those tax exemptions. We know that Washington has the most regressive tax system in the country. So that affects the low income peoples more. A progressive way is an income tax. And I know that word makes everybody knee-jerk and shudder, but it really is a more progressive, a more fair way of getting revenue. If we were to do that at the very same time in the same bill, we need to also do a sales tax reduction so that people know we're making an effort to balance and that we are not going to just layer tax upon tax upon tax. Thank you.
Jesse?
Thank you. I suspect, so we have a tax infrastructure work group that's been going around the state, getting into nuts and bolts about what kind of tax reform we need. We do have a system that's too regressive. I want to say, first of all, victory lap, we passed the capital gains tax here in Washington State. That is a big progressive deal, okay? It's, for some folks, the income tax is the holy grail, but that's got to be right underneath it. I think we have to look at, I suspect that an income tax is going to be hard to get the votes for. So what can we get? Can we look at a B&O income tax instead of a gross receipts tax? Because right now, let's say you have a business, you make 50% profit, another business makes 1% profit. They pay on the gross receipts, so the business making 1% profit gets taxed proportionally way more. So if you're taxing them instead on their income and on their revenue, then it's much more fair. I think there's a chance that we get much broader consensus on that. And frankly, and it's been frustrating for me, unless you have a certain amount of consensus in the legislature, it's hard to pass things. So I want to focus on what I think we can do maybe next year. I think that might be a viable option on the income tax level.
Thank you. Let's try to do this one more time. Representative Rio, and watch the timer here in the screen. We've got 90 seconds.
Thank you so very much. I'll try to stay within my boundaries of 90 seconds. Yes, I believe we should have a state income tax because there's the, yeah, you need, thank you. Because what we have right now is not only upside down, but thoroughly unfair. And so get, especially for the businesses, some sort of a income tax rather than the gross tax that we have right now. And not only is it not fair, but it is also very cumbersome. I have even had business owners who told me they raise the tax, just make it much, spending so much time figuring out the taxes for the various jurisdictions. So I support an income tax and I supported the capital gains tax. We also need to make sure that the rich pays their proportionate share, and so that our working families can actually afford to live and not be getting even further behind than they've been through this pandemic, as well as, of course, before that.
Lauren?
Yes, so I am not certain that I've met a progressive tax proposal that I don't like. I supported an income tax. I was enthusiastically supportive of the capital gains tax. One of the more interesting ideas that's relatively new in the legislature the last couple sessions is a wealth tax, which is a tax on intangible property. It's also known as the billionaire's tax. So of the 7.6 million people who live in our state, there's about 100 of us, I don't think anyone in this room who is a billionaire. And it would be a tax on those individuals specifically that generate significant revenue. The area that I work the most on in taxes is known as sin taxes. So taxes on liquor and cannabis, because of the nexus with my area of work. I've been working to close a tax loophole for pharmaceutical warehouse distributors who distribute opioids and other drugs. This session, I will be putting forward a proposal related to taxes and fees on firearms. So it turns out that our, for example, our firearm dealer's license and our concealed pistol licenses have not been raised since I was in the second grade in 1994. And so I intend to raise those and actually use that dedicated revenue toward the removal of firearms from individuals convicted of domestic violence and individuals subject to domestic violence protection orders. So working on kind of those specific areas in addition to supporting the broader tax reform proposals.
Go ahead, Henry.
I'm going to repeat a lot of things that they just said. Javier's very excited to hear the findings from the tax structure working group. Washington has one of, if not the most progressive tax structures in the country, and it's clearly unreliable. If there's one thing that COVID has shown us, it's that sometimes people don't buy as many things. And if the state is relying on sales tax to fund essential programs, then we can't make sure that we're delivering services that people need. So moving to systems like an income tax, like a wealth tax, like a more equitable B&O tax, and making sure we're taking weight off the more regressive taxes like the sales tax, like our property taxes that are pushing a lot of seniors who are on fixed incomes out of the homes that they are retiring in place in. There's a lot of steps we can take, and we need a better tax system in order to make sure we're living our values and keeping our communities together. There's a lot of work to do, and again, income tax especially is going to be very difficult. Javier is dedicated to continuing to work on it to make sure that we are moving forward and we're able to find a version of that that is palatable to as many people so we can get something started and we can go on from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt? I don't like taxes either. I don't think anybody does, but I support a progressive income tax, a wealth tax. I support the capital gains tax. Is there's a lot of important things that we need to fund as a society. And unfortunately, with the way our tax system is set up right now, especially with inflation, people who earn lower income are spending more of their money on taxes than people who earn high income. And so that's why we're talking about sort of restructuring the tax system. And I support the wealth tax, the capital gains tax, and the income tax. what Representative Davis was talking about with other more creative ways to generate revenue, like taxes on firearms, taxes on the sale of ammunition. I support legalizing sports gambling statewide, which I think would potentially generate $60 to $100 million per year in tax revenue. Once that got up and running, I would support using that money for housing as well. So I do think that the state government needs to get more creative and figure out taxes. I also think we're somewhat waiting on the Supreme Court to decide whether the capital gains tax is legal, and if in their decision they make it easier for the state government to pass a progressive income tax. So hopefully we'll have that decision relatively soon. We can work on getting those votes.
Thanks, Gerry.
Thank you. Well, we've talked about the fact that we're one of the wealthiest states in the nation. We have some of the greatest concentrations of wealth, corporate and personal, and we don't tax it. And we used to tax personal intangible stock and bond wealth. There was a company on the east side of Lake Washington that at one time, before Amazon was Amazon, was sitting on the biggest mountain of cash ever accumulated in the history of the universe. And it lobbied the legislature in 1999, 2000 to eliminate the tax on stocks and bonds. And that's when we began disinvesting in education. And we need to put that back on. That's the wealth tax. Now, I've prime sponsored it working with our educators. And I was one of the original prime sponsors of the capital gains tax 4 years before it passed. Today, I happen to be chairing a committee that has the boring name of the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee. We review tax preferences, loopholes. Lamb Weston makes your French fries, makes all the French fries at McDonald's, testified in front of me today. We want to continue paying zero business and occupation taxes. Well, let me tell you something. I say to them and their top management, if you want education, if you want an educated workforce, then damn it, pay some taxes.
Thank you. Lelach.
So at risk of sounding similar to many of my colleagues up here, I will tell you that I too am a huge fan of the capital gains tax. The little detail that you may or may not be familiar with the capital gains tax is, in addition to being progressive, the funds go towards early childhood education. And so when I think about where can we best invest our dollars, we get between $9 and $15 back for every dollar we put into early childhood, depending on which study we look at. That's better than any stock market, any real estate investment that you can think of. That is a smart place to put our money. So I am super excited about the capital gains tax. I am very excited to read the report from the committee about the idea of a wealth tax. If that is doable, I am all over that as well. The idea of an income tax, very open to it. Sadly, I don't think we are going to get 2/3 of our legislature to vote to change our constitution the way our legislature is currently composed. So I'd rather spend the energy thinking about other creative ways that we can generate revenue. Another thing that I really support that is happening on a state level right now, we have to sort of reverse some of the regressiveness. We have funds going back to our lowest income families, tax credits. And that right now, I believe we're doing up to 200% of the federal poverty level. Can we increase that? Can we put more money back to the poorest families who are paying a disproportionate amount of sales tax so that we even things out even more?
Thank you. Darya?
So in an effort to not repeat everything that was already said, strongly support a progressive income tax, strongly support the real estate excise tax, strongly support, what I'm missing, an income tax as well. When we're talking about taxes and bringing in more revenue, which we absolutely have to, we need to do so quickly, we also need to talk about how we're spending our money now. And in a lot of ways, I think we can be spending our money better. For example, waiting for folks to fall into the criminal legal system and to fall into institutional care is not only traumatizing for the individual and does not provide effective treatment, it's also incredibly expensive. We are wasting a tremendous amount of money by waiting folks to fall through every last crack in the system. Not only that, when we wait until folks are experiencing great harm, right? We also end up in situations where we're legislating by lawsuit, right? In education, in behavioral health, we have done that multiple times over in the state. We cannot continue to do that. We know that when we need to find money, for the lawsuit, for whatever sort of project there is, we find it. We need to be making sure that our investments reflect our priorities in addition to bringing in new revenue. These are the rest of my time.
Thank you. So we've got a little bit of time left before we have to do the last. What I'd like to do, chair's prerogative. This question is for those races where we've got two candidates in the race. And this is about, lots of questions here about homelessness. What can the state do about that? We talked about Aurora, but prostitution on Aurora, questions about that. There was also in the legislature last year, a big effort made to try and change how the state addresses local zoning to create more housing. Basically, I think to get rid of single family zones and allow more multi-unit dwellings everywhere in a municipality. So if you could address whatever you like out of that mix.
Okay.
Run down one more time.
Homelessness, housing. Mainly.
Okay, in 90 seconds, oh boy, okay.
Well, this is how these things work.
Okay,
Your choice.
right, I'll give this the best shot. Happy to answer questions and talk more afterwards as well. So, let's tackle, sex work first. That is, something that we have to talk about head on, talking about the Aurora corridor, right? It's something that you see very frequently. Right, with my dad to the hardware store, and we see folks who are out there participating in sex work, right? There are folks out there who are participating willingly, and there are folks who are being forced to participate, and that is really unacceptable. One of the things I'm really interested in doing more work on, that I have done a little bit of research in, and I've had some conversations on in my role as co-chair for the Seattle Women's Commission, has been around actually legalizing sex work, bring it out of the dark. We can bring it out of the dark and make sure that folks are actually comfortable coming forward when they need help. We're actually going to be able to address some of the foul things that are happening within sex work. 30 seconds. Housing and homelessness. We need density. We can't get around that, right? I believe the state numbers say that we are roughly somewhere between 250 to 300,000 units short of housing, right? For folks who need it. We are going to have to make that up quickly, and that's going to mean that we need to increase density everywhere. How density looks neighborhood to neighborhood is going to look different, right? Some neighborhoods it's going to look like apartments. Some neighborhoods it's going to look like 4 or 6 plexes, right? And we need to stay flexible and realize that there is not just single family zoning or apartments, there's a lot in between. All right, hopefully I touched on both of that.
Thank you.
All right, well, I will try and tackle a portion as well. So when I think about housing and I think about the unhoused that we see, I think of that as being symptoms. Underneath that is a diagnosis. And the way we treat the housing crisis really depends on figuring out what the diagnosis is and treating those root causes. So if we have someone who is not housed because they are escaping a domestic violence situation, they need certain sorts of resources. If we have someone who is not housed because they graduated from our foster care system and are not having adequate supports around them, different resources. We have someone who's not housed because of a mental health issue or a drug addiction issue, different resources yet again. So I think that the idea of tailoring what we need to do based on the underlying diagnosis is very important. We absolutely need more housing. We are short, as Darya was saying, hundreds of thousands of units. I am a big fan of the idea of tiny houses. I think we can erect those quickly. I think we can erect them relatively inexpensively. Are they a long permanent solution? No, but do they allow for people to have a level of safety, a place to lock the door, where their medications can be kept securely, where they can reach sanitation, where they can charge their cell phone so they can hopefully get a call from a future employer? Absolutely. And so I think that the idea of doing things that are quick and doable now so that we can get progress is super important, and my time is up. I'm happy to chat more about all of those issues.
Thank you. Let's go to Matt. Sorry, Gerry.
Could you not? No.
Two-person races.
I've got
So everybody wants to live in a safe, clean neighborhood, and I don't think that's too much to ask. And the government can do a lot to help ensure that that happens. But I think a lot of times these issues that you're talking about, people have frustrations when they see that they're not being addressed, or that the problem is getting worse. And so often our default reaction is we're not tough enough on crime. Right? And it's a problem of either lax policing or lax prosecution. And that's why, you know, my car is getting broken into, or my house is getting broken into, or that's why people are sleeping on the side of the road. But if you think about that sort of more deeply, that's not the case at all. And a lot of the problems that you're talking about are really problems of instability that are caused by macroeconomic issues. First and foremost is the rising cost of housing. There was an article in the Seattle Times a couple of days ago about the Mathew Valley in eastern Washington, and how even in eastern Washington, in the rural area, housing prices have gone up so much that the restaurant owners there are actually putting up their employees in trailers because otherwise they can't afford to live in the Mathew Valley. It is a statewide issue. We need to upzone, and that's something that people are uncomfortable with, but we need to upzone. We need to spend enough money so everyone has access to housing like ours.
Thank you.
So Javier is co-sponsored legislation that would dramatically increase the where you can build higher density units. We need to build more around transit centers and around existing support. So grocery stores, community buildings. It turns out that we don't have the ability to just build everywhere. There are only so many construction companies in Washington State, as it turns out. So making sure that we're focusing in areas where people will be connected to services first. And there's already a natural gap there for more community, for more folks to be living, as a really big starting point. Expanding access to wraparound services for people who are transitioning into permanent housing. Without those wraparound services, we know that people fall right back out of housing. So making sure that as people transition into housing, that's a lasting transition, that sticks, is really important. There is, as other folks have said, there are hundreds of units. There's a gap of hundreds of units of housing from where we need to be and where we are. And by making sure that we're starting with areas where there are already the facilities and infrastructure in place to be able to take in that expansion has to be the first step. And then working to make sure that we are working with communities to make sure that it's affordable, that we're not displacing communities that have already established there. Sorry.
Well, I think it's hard to overstate the housing affordability issue as one of the biggest challenges of our time. I stay away from the word crisis because we use it for everything. It's cliche. But housing, I think, is one of the things that's actually driving the teacher strike, for example, because we're seeing less students, which is sort of collapsing the support for staff in terms of the funding mechanisms. Because I think that parents are moving out of the district because of the housing costs, right? So that's also undermining our school and our education system. It's pretty scary. I am proud to say we've made some progress in the legislature in the last few years, and it's going to take time to show up, but we passed condo liability reform, and that should help with home ownership opportunities for people who can't move just from renting an apartment to buying a McMansion, right? When I grew up in Seattle, the houses in my block were about 1,500 square feet. And almost all of them over the years, the Greenlight got torn down and built all the way out to the end of their lots, 4,500 square feet. People can't afford that who don't come in to work for Amazon and the tech industry from out of state, right? So, I think cottage housing is important. I think that's an underused option. In terms of zoning, I thought the net density idea in the middle housing bill was a bit much. But I did support the ADU, so subdividing your property and putting up a second unit, I think we need to look at. I'm happy to talk about that one.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. Again, on the subject of housing, which intersects with public safety, which intersects with mental health. The problem with the problems is that it's not just one problem. We need a cooperative effort in public-private housing. We tried public housing, and if you remember those images, those were not good. For the last, whatever, 20, 30 years, we've tried private housing, and look where we are. So we need a cooperative effort. We also need leadership, and the leadership to set parameters on this growth, to set parameters for developers. We don't need out-of-state developers coming in, making their profits, leaving, and now we're stuck with a big cement square building. That does not serve community. This building is a testament to community. So when we make developments and make large housing projects, I've had a constituent say, where's the community? Where's the central area? We need to consider the environment at the same time. We do not waive SEPA laws just for development. We've had massive development in Shoreline. I don't see the affordability following. So just development is not the answer. When we have low income housing and private housing, we do need those wraparound services. That's what makes the difference in success.
Thank you. If you'll pass the mic all the way down, this is the part of the evening for your final remarks. Each of the candidates has up to 60 seconds. If you don't want it all, you don't have to use it all. But if you missed anything that you want to say, if there's an issue still left out there, this is your chance to address it now.
Wow, I think that you can see this is complicated. It is really complicated, and it's going to take some people that, like these other candidates here, that pick up the challenge or willing to take the challenge. I'm running for Congress District 7, and I think it's going to be a challenge. We got 800,000 people that you need to represent, and that's going to be a challenge. And I want to be able to represent them. I'm a different voice than the current incumbent, and I'm more conservative. I'm concerned about inflation. You know, we talked about housing. With inflation, they changed the interest rates for housing. Went from 3 to 6. Come on, let's push it back down. Let's make housing more affordable. Homelessness, crime, all those side issues. I want to tackle those as well from a national or district level. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
It's like the county fair, like rodeo. I've been milking myself all night. It's a nice verdict. Again, my name is Julie Anderson, and I'm running as a nonpartisan candidate for Secretary of State. I have unmatched enthusiasm for the work. I know it because I'm doing it, and I love it. This isn't something that I dabble in. This is something that I do every day. Running elections, recording and preserving documents and making them accessible to you, helping to hold government accountable by being the repository of record, and the registry of corporations. I'm a nationally certified election administrator. I'm a state certified election administrator. I'm a state certified public records officer, and I have 13 years of hands-on experience. You've heard that I've got over 40 election professionals, current and former, who are endorsing me, including Secretary of State Sam Reed. Kim Wyman is not able to give a recommendation. Many of you would ask after her. She's prohibited by the Hatch Act from doing that. Please visit my website at julieanderson.org for a lot of detailed information.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Patricia Weber, Dr. Patricia Weber, running for state senate in the 32nd district. I am the sole endorsed candidate of the 32nd district. I also want to say that my campaign is run on people power. I have no corporate donations that I'm taking and no big oil donations. So it's a lot of work. We're glad to have any volunteers. Anybody is welcome to come to our events and discuss more of these problems. I look forward to putting my energy in solving these problems, keeping an open door and emphasizing communication with all the constituents.
Thanks for coming again tonight. My name is Jeff Solomon. I'm running for re-election for the 32nd District State Senate seat. And an issue that often gets short shrift that we don't talk about very much because we're, reasonably dealing with the problems in front of us, homelessness and whatnot, is the environment. Our planet is burning up. If you look at the Seattle Times today, they're saying we might have a smoky weekend this weekend. I'm hoping, well, gosh, I'd like to just get away and not deal with that, not to stay inside. And this is happening year after year, right? But it's only been a few years since this became the new norm. If that doesn't tell you that we are in a crisis, and I will use that word for this issue, I don't know what does. I spent a lot of my time focusing on climate change mitigation, especially around salmon recovery. It's an iconic species. We don't have a right to wipe out wildlife that lives here. We don't have a right to create a planet that is not livable for the next generation, for my son, for your children. We need to wake up to this problem before it's too late.
Lauren, we're gonna try one more time to go to the phones and get Representative Cindy Ryu on.
Hi, I'm Cindy Ryu, running for re-election to the 32nd Legislative District, Position 1. I really do appreciate you putting this on because it is so important for you to be engaged, and obviously that's why you're here. It is also just as important to reach out to your local city and council members, and so of course also the mayor. So I hope that you will stay engaged on an ongoing basis. So I will continue to work on community and economic development, as well as of course supporting the Aura revitalization efforts. I am also working on building 400 units of permanently affordable publicly owned housing on Furcrest campus. And so I hope I am looking forward to continuing to serve with my seatmates, as well as, of course, keeping the majority in the House. And I hope the Senate, I'm sure Senator Solomon is working on making sure that the Senate keeps the Democratic majority as well. Thank you so much.
Again, Lauren Davis, I want to thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'll just mention in closing what I've been working on really since session ended and hope to work on next year, which is issues related to domestic violence. And I think that's really important to our district, not just because 1 in 4 women in our district, like myself, have survived domestic violence, but because our neighbors care about homelessness, and domestic violence is the #1 cause of family homelessness. Our neighbors care about gun violence, and 2/3 of mass shootings are domestic violence related. Our neighbors care about public safety, and the #1 predictor of recidivism of any kind and recidivism for violent crime is domestic violence. So I'm actually putting together an entire package of budget and policy priorities related to domestic violence that my colleagues and I will be unveiling later this year, and really look forward to moving that forward in the 2023 legislative session. So thank you all.
Thanks for sharing that.
Hello again. Unfortunately, Javier is very sad that he couldn't be here tonight, but he hates talking about himself, so I'll use it as an excuse to talk about how great he is. Javier will be the first Mexican-American born and raised in Eastern Washington to be in the state Senate. He is the product of public education, able to get through college with the help of Pell Grants. And he sees it as his duty to make sure pathways that led him to the state Senate or to the state House and now onto the state Senate are broader for the next generation of people coming through it. There is so much work to be done, and so and Javier is the right person to do it. I would love to talk to you more about his positions on making sure that we have access to the full suite of reproductive health care, on more of the environment, and I'd love to talk to you more after. Thank you so much.
Representative Valdez is a very, very nice guy. Henry is also a very nice guy and a great campaign manager. It's been an incredible privilege for me to run for this open Senate seat. Running for office is incredibly difficult and it can be very lonely, but it's also very rewarding to be able to, talk about your vision for your community, to participate in your community. One thing that I've been plugging throughout this race is that I think we need a full-time state legislature. And I think that our state legislators need to get a raise. They make about $55,000 a year. Is that right? $56,000 per year. And that, because it's supposedly a part-time legislature, but as Representative Davis said, they do a lot of work in the interim and they're working on behalf of the community. They need more time to be able to pass good bills, and they should have that time. But the salary is at a point now where a lot of people don't want to do that service or aren't able to continue doing it. So I think we need to give them a raise.
Thank you all for engaging tonight. Please feel free to email myself or any of the candidates, of course. Please come to during session, I hold weekly drop-in discussion hours on Saturday mornings because it shouldn't be easier for the lobbyists to talk to your representative than it is for you as my constituents. And during when we're out of session, I do it once a month. So we're on Zoom or in person, email me and just drop in and continue the discussion at any time. I've talked a lot about local issues today. Nationally, led the nation in developing legislation on methane and climate, on ending sexual harassment, past the harassment practices at our universities, on e-cigarette epidemic amongst our youth, and many other issues. Thank you.
All right, so as you've heard, I'm Lelach, a pediatrician. And when you think about pediatricians, hopefully you think about prevention. That is the bread and butter of what we do. We're all about getting in early and setting kids up for success so that hopefully we have fewer messes to clean up down the road. And that completely is the perspective that I'd like to bring to legislative work. I have 23 years of taking care of patients. So literally thousands of families who have shared their stories and their lives with me. And my goal is to bring all of those perspectives, all of those voices, all of those stories to the legislative process. So if you go to my website, you'll see that in the last 12 years, I've been very active with the legislative committee for the state pediatric association, and so have been involved with passing already a lot of different policies for the wellness of the families and the children in our communities. So that is what I'm hoping to continue to do as an elected official.
Rodeo's down here too, Julie. Hi, everyone. Darya Farivar again, running to your next state representative for the 46th district position too. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight and speak to you. I hope I get to catch up with you afterwards as well. We had a really big week recently. I'm really excited to share with you all that I have been endorsed by all three of the former candidates from the primary, and we've also received the sole endorsement from the 46th district Democrats. I am absolutely ecstatic and so proud of the work that we've been doing on this campaign. Ultimately, at the end of the day, We want to make sure that we're getting someone in office who knows the system, who can get there and hit the ground running and deliver on some of our biggest challenges. It's what I've been doing all day, every day. And I know that the way that we get there and we do this and we tackle these big issues is by lifting every voice and making sure that communities that haven't been heard have a voice and have an opportunity to be at that decision-making table. We won the primary in August, and I plan to do it again in November, and I hope we can bring you all with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. Randy is Vice President of the Howler Lake Community Council.
Well, gee, Howler Lake and Broadview, great job coming out here tonight. Now, listen, this is just a start. We're gonna continue to do this. This is the first time back, people. First time back. It's in this building. Nothing has been going on civically wise for 2 years, 3 years. And let's give a big hand to our candidates, Howler Lake, Broadview. And I'm gonna turn it back to Jim.
Thanks to Howler Lake for hosting tonight, for sponsoring this meeting. Broadview, Bitter Lake, we're tagging along and get out there and vote. There are a few pamphlets here. If you know anybody who's not registered, make sure to take one of those, get people registered, get out there and vote. Talk to the candidates afterwards, reach out online, and enjoy the rest of the summer. Thank you all.